Hello everyone, welcome. You're listening to Audiobookish, an audiobook review and discussion podcast. My name's Fahad Rahman and I'm joined by Poppy Knight.
Hello.
And today is the second in our special episodes reviewing the books on the British Book of the Year shortlist for audiobook fiction. And we'll be discussing two titles today, Careless by Kirsty Capes as narrated by Amber Gadd, and The Wizards of Once, Never and Forever by Cressida Cowell as narrated by David Tennant. I think we'll start with Careless, and I'll read out the blurb for that. Sometimes it's easy to fall between the cracks. At 3:04 p.m. on a hot, sticky day in June, Bess finds out she's pregnant. She could tell her social worker Henry, but he's useless. She could tell her foster mother Lisa, but she won't understand. She really ought to tell Boy, but he hasn't spoken to him in weeks. Bess knows more than anyone, love doesn't come without conditions. But this isn't a love story. And would you like to read out Kirsty's bio?
Yes, so Kirsty Capes works in publishing and as a care leaver is an advocate for better representation for care-experienced people in the media. She recently completed her PhD, which investigates female-centric care narratives in contemporary fiction, under the supervision of 2019 Booker Prize winner Bernardine Evaristo. Careless is her first novel.
Okay, so I'll get started on this. I really loved this audiobook. I kind of fell in love with it almost immediately. I think Amber Gadd's narration is like utterly captivating and remarkable, and I think it kind of, this is her first audiobook, I believe, and I think it kind of announced, not to get too hype about it, but I think it kind of announces like a major talent in terms of like audiobook narration. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. What were your kind of like first initial impressions?
Yeah, so I'm the opposite. I'm really not a huge fan, and largely because I didn't like the audio. The book itself I thought was good, but maybe not my kind of thing. But I actually just couldn't really get into the story and judge it properly because the audio was just really off for me. So like Amber's narration style really wasn't to my taste. And I had some real issues with just the production quality of it. So yeah, that's my opposite views. I don't know who wants to go first.
Yeah, I think I'll go first. So, because one of the reasons I really enjoyed Amber's narration is that I've really felt that she captured Bess's inner voice, and I think I kind of like fell in love with the character of Bess, and I think she really captured, Amber really captured the vulnerability and the snarkiness and the kind of like immaturity around that character, and I really felt like I was listening to a conversation with her rather than being talked to. So that's one of the reasons why. So I like the character, and I like the way that Amber brought that character to life as well. So you talked a little bit there about you had some issues with like the production quality. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, but I'll maybe start with kind of what I thought of the narration style, and because I don't like giving bad reviews and stuff, because I can really appreciate how rubbish it is to have that criticism or whatever, so I'm going to try and be as fair and constructive as possible. And it is very definitely clear, even just from our discussion here, that a lot of this is personal taste. Not everyone's going to like the same narrators. We've done quite well so far. We've pretty much agreed on all of them. So yeah, this is very much be aware that it's personal taste and not take this as some of those really horrible reviewers that are just like, this person's awful. I'm not doing that. But yeah, style just really wasn't for me. Like the emphasis and pacing and tone that she chooses to use just isn't what I would do, and isn't what I enjoy so much. And I thought the narration parts especially were really deadpan and monotone, and there's more energy in the voices and some stuff later on, but that wasn't really my bag. I also felt that sometimes she was sort of trying a bit too hard when she was reading, like over enunciated some stuff in some places, which might be partly down to that, sort of being quite new to reading audiobooks, and I can totally understand that, yeah, when you're reading something off a page, you do easily tend to do that, but it was something that stuck out to me on the style of it. I also felt like her voices were all very similar. I struggled to... Again, this is something that people will differ on. Some people really don't mind about that. I didn't love it because I found myself listening to part of a sentence and then going, oh, wait a minute, that's such a body talking, when I hadn't realised it before. So, yeah, I think...
This is really fascinating because I've got a completely opposite experience to that. I really... I felt that her narration carried so much empathy and warmth, and I felt that the pace of it, the kind of the cadence of her speech, I found really engaging. Is also, I think that's kind of quite fascinating that
it is
that I think you were a little bit bothered a little bit more by the cadence, and I think she did a fine job with the voices,
right? Okay.
as well. I could always tell which character was speaking,
right?
So, as well. So yeah, it's kind of it's really curious that this book would be the one where our different tastes in
I know
earring would come out. So
definitely, yeah, it's really weird. And like you say, we listen to the same narration and yet thinking very opposite things about how it works for us, and it's that thing. It's the fact that the style didn't work for me.
Yeah.
But that is an important thing to consider, if you do have the choice between listening and reading, that does the style of narration work for you is a big thing. That's why we have previews on kind of, download platforms and stuff like that, so that you can see if that voice works for you. I know I've certainly turned down audiobooks before in favour of reading it because that narrator just doesn't work for me. And yeah, that's not meaning they're a terrible narrator and no one will like them, because someone will love them, like you're doing. And because I had a little look at some of the reviews as well, and so many people thought she was fab and were absolutely raving about it. There was one review that I saw that did use the word monotone.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, it's not just me, because I was starting to feel I was a bit alone. But yeah, so that's very definitely a kind of style choice thing. And yeah, for me, really not my style, and therefore it did impact my listening experience.
Yeah.
But yes, in that sense of not enjoying giving bad reviews, I'm not saying it's terrible. I'm saying it just really, wasn't for me. There were moments where I liked it more and where I got more into it and where I felt the performance was, in my opinion, better. So yeah, but yeah, not all the way through, unfortunately.
Yeah, so it's especially tricky when you're doing your first audiobook, what artistic decisions you make.
Of course,
and how that's guided by the production company. And you've mentioned to me before, these are usually recorded on quite tight turnarounds.
Yeah, that's
as well.
Point
so just
coming up as well. Yeah, no, definitely. And so that kind of leads on to issues I had with the production quality, because as well as not really getting pulled in by the narration, I kept getting kind of shoved out of it by a jolt of feeling that, okay, I can hear where a cut was there, or I think we've switched between takes there, and that kind of thing, and it really took me out of it. So sometimes just where pauses were just slightly too short, where it doesn't feel natural for normal speech, or they were slightly too long. There was one, I noted here, is in chapter 16, where there was just a huge pause mid-sentence that's clearly just been missed in editing, at least in the files that I've listened to from the publisher for reviewing. I don't know if that's going to be what listeners would get.
Which version? Because I downloaded the version on Audible.
Okay. Yeah, I'd listened to the files that were from the publisher on
Okay, so in anticipation of these episodes, the British Book Awards sent over to us review copies, and sometimes there might be discrepancies between what ends up published on Audible and what we were sent as well.
Yeah, I would have thought that the files that we've been sent would be final, especially given that this was published last year.
Yes.
I would imagine that they would send the same files that they send, say, to Audible to upload.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously, I don't know that for sure. I don't know if there hasn't been any, edits made since. But yeah, certainly in that, which is what I was reviewing, there's, I think some of those kind of pauses and stuff, some of the subtle ones that, like I say, just jolted me out, I kind of doubt will have been changed. I'd like to think that one I spotted in chapter 16 with the huge mid-sentence pause might have been fixed or might be fixed soon. But yeah, I found there was some quite big volume inconsistencies as well, where chunks of just
I did notice that.
Okay, again, glad not just me. And like where just like the sound or intonation didn't match, where the sound didn't match, I think a lot of those times were where clearly corrections were re-recorded but in a different space or maybe with a different setup, and they weren't or couldn't be matched properly. And I can definitely appreciate the logistics around trying to do that. You know, it's something that I brush upon in my job. So I do get that. But yeah, regardless, it affected the experience for me. And then the ones where like the tone didn't match, like the intonation didn't match and stuff, I wonder if that's possibly partly because of this being Amber's first audiobook. You know, that idea of having to match what you've said tone-wise to the previous sentence or when you've just stopped or the last take that you've done is something I think is quite particular to doing audiobooks as opposed to like acting in general and things like that. It wasn't that either intonations were bad in any way, but I think must be a real skill to really just keep that same flow, that same fluency, that same tone and texture, and just matching it basically to what you've done before. I can totally understand why if this is your first audiobook, that's not necessarily going to be, you know, a skill that you already have. And it's the kind of thing where, you know, I'm criticizing a lot of these editing things, but that isn't really something that a producer can do all that much about, you know, in that sense. You know, they can stop and restart, but that might mean more, you know, discrepancy in tone rather than less.
Yes.
So I'm kind of, wanting to explain though that I think that's kind of an effect of the circumstance rather than, putting blame on specific people.
Yeah.
And so this is what you'd said before about kind of like the tight turnaround thing. I think there maybe wasn't enough time given to it in production-wise. I think some of the stuff could have been, if more time had been taken over editing and checking it and stuff like that, could have been fixed. And, you know, maybe, like we say, has been in the files that listeners might end up listening, or maybe even the ones that you listen to. And yeah, job-wise, I can totally empathise with a lot of that. And, you know, the difficulties of editing, I can empathise with from, you know, editing these podcasts and stuff. I totally do appreciate that. But
if it affects your own experience,
exactly, it affected my experience. And yeah, what I got of this audiobook was I didn't find the audiobook very good itself.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. So we've got different opinions around the narration. I thought it was brilliant. You thought it was less brilliant. Let's talk a little bit about the story.
Yes,
so
please.
I think you mentioned previously that this isn't the sort of book that you'd normally read. I think that's probably goes the same for me. I don't read a lot of stories about young pregnant teenage girls. So let's talk about the character of Bess, because I really love Bess. I kind of like fell in love with that character a little bit, and I so wanted her to kind of like make good choices wanted to reach through the audio somehow and just shake her and just, no, don't do that. Don't do that, Bess. That's the so and if a text can make you care about someone that much, I think that for me that's like a little bit of magic. So I was just wondering how you felt about the character of Bess just initially.
I can totally see why you had that reaction, definitely. I didn't personally, but as I say, partly because that voice I was hearing in my head didn't do that for me, didn't pull me into it. And I tried to separate that and think about the words, but, you know, because that's a more active thing, I didn't quite have that emotional pull. But yes, I did definitely sympathise with it and can agree with you of wanting things to work out for her, being frustrated when she makes the wrong decision. Yes. So yeah, I can definitely see her as a compelling character. When I listened, I wasn't as compelled as you, but yeah, I think she is a good and interesting character, well-written character.
So let's talk a little bit about the story then. So Bess is in foster care. She finds out she's pregnant, and the novel is basically her making decisions about what to do with her life after she's fallen pregnant, kind of who she tells about it, you know, what decisions she's going to do to kind of like handle the pregnancy, whether she kind of tells her foster parents, whether she tells boy, and kind of how she's going to handle her ambitions to move away from the place that she's living in, with kind of like the realization as if she, does kind of decide to carry this baby to term, that those ambitions might be curtailed somewhat. So how did you feel that kind of story was handled? What did you kind of like think about that?
I thought it was very skillfully handled. And I think it's interesting with that bio that I read out about how clearly there's the whole weight of that PhD behind this.
Yes.
Which is really cool and really interesting. I really, really liked the criticisms that it makes of the care and foster system, and highlighting how it makes people into transactions, and it calls into question what actual care is allowed and is possible and is encouraged within that system, and what's discouraged, and a lot of the complexities around that I thought was really, really fascinating and really well done. And then
it's quite a heavy book in a lot of ways, because it talks about, teen pregnancies, it talks about the care system, it talks about the experience of second generation Southeast Asian Muslims. That's kind of quite a prominent theme in the book, and kind of also this, how people get trapped in a place. So I think where is this? It's kind of near Shepperton Studios. Is that correct? And how that as a place is really a character that kind of looms large over all the characters in there, and how Bess and her best friend are kind of united in this desire to get away from this place as quickly as possible as well. So it's kind of a lot of like heavy, meaty stuff. And there's also the relationship with Boy, kind of there's hints around grooming and that sort of stuff within their relationship, because he's considerably older than her as well. So there's a lot of meaty themes in there.
There is. And this is a thing where it's part a compliment and yet me still saying I wasn't a fan. In that I thought the things where the characters are just really horrible was very well done, extremely well written, made very real. You could see them as real people that were doing these things, saying these things, and stuff like that, which, yes, is great testament to the writing. But I really didn't like it because it made me angry. It made me so angry. And just annoyed, just like physically tense and frustrated. And it made me angry and disgusted and unhappy. And it was that thing, I wasn't sad. I was unhappy, and and that might be weird, but there's quite a distinction between that, because maybe like quite sadistically, I sometimes enjoy listening to sad stories, and really dark themes and tragic stuff, and putting myself through that emotional turmoil and the catharsis and stuff like that. I can often really enjoy that. Whereas this one, I didn't feel like it was that. It just made me wound up.
Okay.
and I couldn't enjoy that experience because I just didn't want to be in that. I didn't want to be that wound up. It didn't feel like a productive wound up for me. It just felt like, I hate these people. I'm angry. I'm unhappy. No one's going to want to be around me anymore. When I'm in this mood. So in that sense, I think it was a very powerful book, very well done. And for some people, fantastic. For me, that power just wasn't doing the sort of thing I like from my fiction, you know? And that's probably quite selfish of me to, I guess in some ways, just want to look at the things that make me comfortable, even if they make me sad, there's, comfort in it. And I'm aware that in some ways is a selfish thing. But, we've spoken about this before. I like my fiction for escapism, and sometimes escapism that does touch on real things, and really connect to the real world. But this, for me, I didn't enjoy the experience, even though I can recognise why it was really well done.
Yeah, I think in some ways this book is, there's a lot of tension in the book because, obviously there's that looming timeline. She has to make a decision before a certain date, and what the ramifications of that decision are going to be like, they're going to be like big ramifications kind of like either way. So in some ways this did sort of like play out almost like a thriller in some ways, in terms of like her trying to find out more information about herself. I think that's kind of like one of the big themes, is like at that age do you really know yourself well enough to kind of make these life-altering, and it's kind of like crazy in this country that we put kids through that the GCSEs and A levels and just all right, that's going to set you up for the rest of your life. And it's kind of so but just to get back to kind of the emotional experience you had, I still felt really tense during the book, but that kind of like tension was more like manifested as a anxiety for Bess to do really well, where I think for you kind of manifested, from the sounds of it, it sounds like it more manifested as like a deep, like unhappy frustration at the mess that all the characters were in.
Oh, so, definitely. Yeah, exactly that. And knowing how accurate it is to the real world. I have very strong opinions on a woman's right to do what she wants with her body, and having to hear so much of other people's opinions, which I know are in the real world not just opinions but enforced practices of what then happens and how rules are made and all that stuff. And it made me annoyed for that. It made me annoyed that is a thing in the world. And I think that's it. I think I was very much just didn't want to be confronted with the terrible stuff going on, and not being able to separate the two, I think. And maybe partly because of that, not feeling as emotionally in the story. I was seeing it more from that outside, this is a critique on the world thing, and I don't like it. But as in, I don't like the world, not I don't like what Kirsty's done.
I think we haven't really talked about Kirsty's writing a lot. I think she writes beautifully. There were like some really beautiful sequences, especially kind of those sequences with Isha where they're bantering with each other. I think she's got a really great ear for dialogue, and I think the way she writes those sequences where like it's just the two of them together and they're kind of like planning on how they're going to take over the world, and those sequences I think were really beautifully written, as were the sequences with her and Boy, who I think is, without getting into too many spoilers, one of the most detestable characters we've come across in a long time. Yes, I really enjoyed how she makes you understand why Bess is drawn to Boy, in terms of like making him like attractive and appealing, while also keeping you on tenterhooks in terms of the fact that you probably realize this is not a good thing for her in the long run as well.
Right, okay. It's interesting. So I agree with one of your points and disagree with the other. So like, I'm not sure I agree personally on the stuff with Boy. I didn't really get that.
Okay.
Where the connection and the pull was. That relationship for me didn't wasn't as compelling. And certainly when you compare it to what we discussed in the last episode about the relationships and the compellingness of The Night She Disappeared and things like that, I'm aware that they're different relationships, but even so, for me, that one fell a little bit flat.
Okay.
But again, I don't know how much of that was me not feeling fully invested in the story, but that one didn't sell to me. I wasn't sold on that one.
I think the reason why it sold for me was that you kind of get the idea quite early on that Bess is, even though she lives in a family, she's kind of quite an isolated character, and she's looking for affection. And Boy kind of provides some of that affection. He's also a little bit dangerous, which I think some teenage girls would be kind of attracted to. So I think that's why and I think it's a kind of a similar thing with The Night She Disappeared. I think that's also why those two characters were kind of drawn together. She's isolated in her family unit.
Yeah, so I think that's another one where, we'll potentially agree to disagree, I guess, on how that relationship worked out. But the one with Bess and Ishal I thought was great. I completely agree with you there. I thought it was fantastically written, and I really loved their friendship. I loved how Ishal wasn't afraid to tell Bess that she was a shit friend for, not listening to her about how important her religion was to her, and stuff like that. I thought that was really good. I really thought their relationship was fab. I also thought the relationship between Bess and her sister was really good as well.
That was kind of like typical sibling rival. Well, not sibling rivalry, would be that kind of like how different siblings have got different statuses.
Yeah, but also just there's so much love, more in the later part of the audiobook. The real love and connection between them I thought was fantastic. A, well written, and B, that was a nice, happy thing to see of like, oh, look, this can be a lovely relationship. So yeah, I liked those two.
Yeah. So I think we've got two slightly different recommendations. I'm going to recommend this wholeheartedly. I think Kirsty Capes is a fantastic talent, and I really look forward to seeing what she does next. I really enjoyed Careless, and I thought the audiobook was absolutely fantastic, and I would really like this to actually to win the entire thing.
Wow.
And having not listened to The Fellowship of the Ring or The Sandman yet, for me, this is, out of the books that we've listened to on the shortlist, this is the best one. So you've got, I imagine, a slightly different
yeah. I don't think I'll be surprised to anyone that is not what I think personally about it. But I would say that, you know, I'm fully aware these are both debuts, you know, debut author, debut narrator. And I think I would be keen to see what more comes of them both in the future. This one did really miss the mark for me, and I don't think I'll be rushing to listen to the next one. But, you know, I haven't written either of them off. I think there's definitely some potential there for stuff that I'd really enjoy. Yeah. And then, if you did like it, because I was having a look before, I've seen that they're doing another one, the same pair, written by Kirsty Capes and narrated by Amber Gadd. There's another one coming out in, I think, July. Yeah. So, yes, I'm not sure if I'll be, rushing for that one. But I won't turn away if there's something in future. But just missed the mark a little bit for me.
And I've just noticed that this has actually been nominated for the Women's Prize for Fiction as well in 2022. So okay. I
have an unpopular opinion, but that's my opinion.
Okay, so the next book that we're going to talk about is The Wizards of Once, Never and Forever. Do you want to read out the blurb for that, Poppy?
I can do. Yep. So, the final book in the Wizards of Once quartet, the #1 best-selling series from the author of How to Train Your Dragon. Warriors and wizards combine forces against the dreadful power of the King Witch, whose searing evil threatens not only the Wildwoods, but all its creatures. Zar and Wish are on the final leg of their journey. First stop, the Mines of Unhappiness. Here, starvation is never far away for the magical creatures who toil in its horrible depths. Zar and Wish must escape, and fast. Zar needs to take control of his ever-growing witch stain, and Wish must achieve her destiny. But the Tatzelworm is in their way, a grotesque monster who threatens to block every entrance. Time is not on their side, but the forests are calling them. Will their combined strength be enough for the biggest quest so far, to defeat the King Witch once and for all?
And I'll read out Cressida Cowell's bio. Cressida Cowell has sold over 11 million books worldwide in 38 languages. How to Train Your Dragon is also an award-winning billion-dollar DreamWorks film series and a TV series shown on Netflix and CBBC. The Wizard of Once has also been optioned for a film by DreamWorks. Cressida is an ambassador for the National Literary Trust, a trustee for World Book Day, and a founder patron of the Children's Media Foundation. She has won numerous prizes for her books, including the Blue Peter Award, the Ruth Rendell Award for Championing Literacy, the Gold Award in Nestle's Book Prize, the Hay Festival Medal for Fiction, and Philosophy Now magazine's award for contributions in the fight against stupidity. That's a great prize to have. Cressida grew up in London, and on a small uninhabited isle off the west coast of Scotland, she now lives in Hammersmith, London, with her husband, 3 children, and a dog called Pigeon. So I think this was a really odd experience for me, because obviously this is at the end of a series of books, and the audiobook starts off with a lot of, as Mark Commode would put it, like Basil exposition to kind of like catch you up to date in terms of what the previous adventures had been. And I really wish that I'd had greater knowledge or had read the previous book in the series, because I think there would have been a much greater catharsis listening to this. I just felt like I was missing out on something. And I could tell that if you were a fan of this series, this would have been like a really good, enjoyable experience. Oh, by the way, the audiobook is narrated by David Tennant as well. So what were your kind of initial impressions?
Yeah, so same as you, I wasn't able to find the time to listen to the previous 3 before going on to this one, so I was going into this fresh, but I was therefore quite glad of that recap. For me, I thought that was quite good. I felt it was quite sufficient. I felt I was able to kind of catch up on what happened. I agree it probably would have been even better if I'd have, been really invested in the series, but it certainly wasn't a thing of, I didn't think you completely lost if you haven't. I thought that was quite good. I did think, as like a slight editorially thing, I think a lot of it was like repeated a couple too many times, and sometimes even with like exactly the same words.
Yes.
I personally would have cut those out a little bit or rearranged those a bit better so that, you didn't feel like you were being told literally the same sentence again.
It was a bit like an info dump, that one, but it's kind of like necessary if you've not listened or read the previous books.
Yeah, I think the info's in general at that start, it was good that we had that recap, but a slight criticism on the overall finish of that, I guess. But I did find it very helpful. I was very glad of that. And I think in general, it didn't feel like here's a recap that if you had listened to the previous ones, you'd be really annoyed about, I don't think. I think it did work very seamlessly. This is a very much a picky word level criticism that I would personally... I'm so bad with repeats. When I'm editing these and listening to how I repeat stuff myself, when I'm talking, I really don't like it. I like to go back and edit. And, when I'm writing things down or like I'm writing emails, I hate how much repeated words, I hate. So it's definitely a bugbear for me. But I thought that was helpful. I also really enjoyed it. It sounds like you did as well. I don't know if you've got a particular point you want to start off.
So the book has got kind of quite an interesting structure because we start at a certain point and then she plays around with the timeline a little bit as well. So I thought that was kind of, for a children's book, I thought that was a really brave decision. What did you kind of feel about the way that initial few chapters kind of like played out in terms of like jumping around the timeline with this omniscient narrator?
No, I thought it was pretty good. And I think it can often be the case to kind of underestimate what kids can handle. I think it suits fine for a kid's book to do that kind of thing. It's also something that was in the Kirsty Capes one as well, of that having the future stuff and flicking back, and I mean obviously the night she disappeared as well, but I thought it was really good. I liked how it was, you leave the characters in a moment of peril and then make us wait for ages while you go back and give us some backstory, which is acknowledged actively in the narration. And I thought it was really good. And that thing of acknowledged actively in the narration literally means it's meta, which if anyone's listened to our podcast before, I'm a huge fan of. I really love that. I loved how that omniscient narrator wasn't an omniscient narrator as in a really detached, nothing to do with the story, kind of the author's brain or a godlike figure kind of omniscient narrator. It was clearly someone who knows everything, but they have a personality, they have an identity, which I really like when there's stories that have that rather than a neutral narration, you have a narrator. And one of the things that I get the impression is something throughout the series is who is this narrator, which this book reveals. And I thought that was really exciting. I really like that. I like that as a feature of a book. I think with it being kids as well, it adds that extra interest. It's something exciting and different. Mystery, which I thought was really good. So and I really liked in connection with that, kind of going on to another point that I really liked, I like how at the end they acknowledge that David Tennant is the narrator of this audiobook. So I loved it. That was a lovely little moment. And there was some stuff throughout where kind of, it's been made as an audiobook. So things like references to the listener and listening to this. I think there was one if you've read the previous book, but that's debatable whether you want to change that or not. But I really liked that there was definitely some care taken over. We want to make that change, which I think is necessary, but I'm still glad when I see it. And the extra bit with the David Tennant-ness, loved it. Loved it.
Got a few comments about what happens towards the end of the book, so I wanted to kind of like park that to one side. The one thing so this is a really fun book. I think the one thing that I really liked was the fact that Cressida Cowell kind of goes wild on the name of like creatures, like things like the Tazzle worm, and all the different giants have got really wild, crazy names, and I really enjoyed that. And you can kind of tell that David Tennant had an absolute ball pronouncing all those names. I think you could really tell that David Tennant was having a really fun time doing this book. Kind of what's the phrase I'm looking for? I think familiarity sometimes breeds contempt, and we have listened to a previous David Tennant book, and he's kind of breaking out some of the similar sort of tricks and similar sort of artistic decisions in terms of like the way he gives voices to certain characters as well. But it's when the one trick is kind of like quite that good, it's still how can you complain about it too much? But yeah, what did you feel about kind of like David's, like, firstly about the names of the characters and then kind of like David's performance?
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I think they're really fab, and won't do spoilers, but there's some interesting stuff about names of characters at the end of the book.
Yes.
Which I thought was really cool, and wish I knew more about. And that's maybe something where the children listening to this might not know about, but maybe it's something where they'll find out about it, remember it, and go, oh wait, I've got to go back and listen to that again and see if I can inform it. So I think that was really good. And then David Tennant's performance, he's a great actor. We know this. I found it really, really enjoyable. I liked his different character voices. I thought they were nice and distinct, and kind of matched and worked. There was one that I wasn't sure really matched. What was my note here? Oh yeah, so I wasn't sure that the Bumbleboozle voice really matched the descriptions in the book.
Okay.
Hopefully that's all I've written in my notes, so I can't constructively say it, but I remember listening to the voice, and then I think it was like, said Bumbleboozle and a description about him, and to me I was just like, they don't add up. It wouldn't be my choice. But that's literally the only, performance criticism I have, really, as a nitpicky thing. I thought the voices were good. I thought, the captivating narration. Yeah, I really liked it. I thought it was good. Yeah,
and kind of also there's some interesting production decisions in this. So there are sound effects in this book. So that there are drum beats, and I think, if I remember correctly, was there a clash of thunder as well?
I have mixed feelings on the sound effects. Some of them I thought were really good. Some of them fell a bit flat for me. So, like, there's not a lot of sound effects in this.
Yes.
They're sort of a very little bit. Yeah, agreed. But so, for example, there was, like, explosion sound effects, right? But to me, that was really quite quiet and sounded more like an aeroplane going overhead than a massive catastrophic explosion. And now, I mean, obviously you don't want to do a huge loud explosion that, breaks the eardrums of the listeners, but it didn't work for me, those noises. And I think if there had been more sound effects throughout, I feel like those would have slotted in better, but instead they came out of nowhere and yet didn't seem to fulfill the purpose. So that didn't quite hit with me. But then there was some other sound effects that I thought were really good. And it's nice when there are some in there to add a bit of extra interest and excitement and stuff.
I wonder what the editorial decision behind... So maybe in the other previous audiobooks in this series, there are a lot more incidents where they can use sound effects like that, and maybe in this particular, maybe that's there were less occasions for them to use.
Yeah, there certainly weren't points where I felt, oh, where was the sound effect? It was less so much that, it was more just that feeling of when those ones came up, they took me by surprise but didn't meet it, and therefore I thought if I was expecting them, and I was expecting subtle sound effects, I don't know, that was just an idea of what might have made those work better for me personally. But this is something where I'm in awe of the people that do the sound effects to stuff like this. So when it comes to like the editing stuff I was criticizing before, I'm obviously not a professional or an expert, but from a year of doing this podcast and teaching myself how to cut and things, cutting wise, I have some skills. I'm going to be honest, I think I have developed some skills that I'm quite proud of. Whereas it comes to how you would add sound effects in, how you would make the decision as to what to add in, how you would find the right thing, how you would make that all work, I have no clue at all. So this is very much criticizing from a position of, I don't know how you do it better. And I'm in awe of you that what was done. But as a listener, this wasn't my favourite example of them being used, or at least not every single sound effect was my favourite example of them being used,
Yeah, it was just really curious that it was used so sparingly, and I'm just trying to think, does that kind of like make them, when they do occur, more special, or do you need to kind of maybe make the decision, or we need to kind of use them throughout a little bit more often.
Like the
So
style
it's just
across
the
whole book. Yeah. Just similar to that is the fact that how the music is used in this as well. And again, I have pros and cons on this. So the music at the start, I wasn't a huge fan of, but that is more just personal taste. For me, it didn't suit the tone of the book. It just, it didn't quite hit home right for me. But then again, the music that was used during the songs at the end, I really liked. There was one especially, I think I wrote down here, that I really enjoyed the backing music. Yeah, so what was called the Wizards of Once song, the backing music on that was really cool. And just the fact of it's great for the audiobook, and I'm sure we'll be talking about this when we talk about the Lord of the Rings ones next time.
Oh, God, yeah.
But the fact that you get to have tune and melody and, potentially backing music like there was here for the songs is something that's really exciting about the audiobook versus, print or ebook.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Yeah, so when I'm reading a book and there's like verses in there, that always kind of like makes me cringe a little bit. To be honest with you, I just skip past those bits. If there's like a poem or a song verse, I'll just like, all right, I'm not reading that.
Right.
Get back to the plot. But yeah, having that musical accompaniment to David singing, I think worked quite well.
Yeah, I've got to say, I felt like it got to a point where I felt like there were a few too many songs in a row. Personally, I felt if they'd have been more interspersed throughout, I think again with knowing Lord of the Rings ones and how they're more spaced, for me I did go, oh my god, another one. But then I enjoyed it, so it was okay. And that is obviously more of the writing than the audio, and I think again, if you're reading it, maybe it doesn't quite have that same, oh, here, there's another song. Or maybe if with your experience there of thinking, oh god, here's one, then maybe you'd think the same. So but also I understand why all the songs were where they were, it was the whole thing that everyone was singing and lots of songs and celebrating. So yes, I thought they were good, but I did think, okay, another one. But it was good, but then another,
So we haven't really talked a lot about the story itself. It's an adventure story, a coming of age story. Zar and Wish are both flawed characters in their own way. Kind of Zar is kind of like I don't know, arrogant, but he's a very kind of sort of...
Yeah, I think arrogant's fair.
Yeah, arrogant young lad who maybe has ideas above his station and wishes... How would you describe her? Because obviously there's a steel underneath there, but there seems to be kind of like a big element of self-doubt in some of her actions as well.
Yeah, there's this thing of like, so Wish being the daughter of a warrior queen, and yet not really wanting war, wanting peace and happiness and friendship, and sort of the suggestion that that's maybe a weakness in some ways. And I really liked in the book how it talks very honestly about how there's both strength and weakness in that, It's not a kind of, fable of you should be confident, or you should be kind, or if you're too kind, you're too weak. Or there's no straightforward message. It really accurately talks about how it's complex. You need a little bit of both. You need a little bit of love. You need a little bit of willing to stick up for yourself and willing to fight for it. It was. I thought that was a really nice kind of overall thesis on what's important, and a lovely, again, taking into consideration the fact that this is a kid's book, it's a very mature and helpful thing of be emotionally healthy, and that kind of thing, a good share of all traits, rather than you have to be big strong macho, or you should only be soft and caring and kind to everyone and get pushed over. It did a really good look at that balance through these two characters and their journey, which I thought was really nice.
Because they each got qualities the other kind of lacks a little
and it's
bit,
sort of Wizard of Oz kind of needs a heart, needs a brain, needs some courage kind of thing.
Kind of the other interesting theme I felt that was running through this particular book, and we're not able to speak to what happens in the other book, is kind of the challenging of traditions and finding new ways to live, not just with your family and the people in your own community, but finding new ways to live with people in differing communities as well. Kind of trying to realizing that forging a future after war is not always like the easiest thing to do, but like it's ultimately the only thing that you can do as well. So I thought that was kind of quite a deep message.
I can agree with you there. Yeah.
How did you feel about Cressida's, use of language, because I do appreciate this is like a children's book, but I felt like there were some points that she might have been a little bit more ambitious with some of the words that she might have chosen to kind of like narrate it.
I think, again, my opinion is a bit like I said before. I think it's easy to underestimate what kids, can handle and stuff like that. I didn't particularly flag that there was anything kind of vocabulary choice-wise that nothing stood out to me in that kind of way. And I think it's good for there to be words in there that, kids might not know.
Yeah.
Because it has that thing of, maybe they'll ask an adult what it means, or maybe they'll be able to figure out from context and they'll learn a new word through that. Yeah. And I think it is very important that kids' books aren't dumbed down.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously be aware of, the style of writing that you use and what they're likely to know and not know. Definitely be aware of your audience. But yeah, definitely not dumbing it down either, I don't think.
Yeah, so I mean, at risk of repeating myself, I really enjoyed this book. I wish I had the greater context of like the story to fully enjoy it. I think this series is, probably one I'll be recommending to like the young readers in my life. I think it's kind of like, I think it seems like great fun, and like Cressida, I think, writes like wonderfully. The way she gets her characters bickering with each other, I think, is like quite a lot of fun, and she's got a really great way of capturing these like complex family dynamics between like children that want to go in a certain direction and parents who have got a certain view of the world and how things should be done to kind of uphold the honor of the house and that sort of stuff. I really enjoy the way she captures that. Then I mean, she writes fantastic like action sequences as well. Kind of like the ending action sequence to this was like that. Wow, it was like so engaging. And again, there was a few sound effects, but yeah, David did a beautiful job of like bringing those action sequences to life as well.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you there, and I think I probably will listen to this again and start from the beginning of the series and listen through. I think it's maybe one where if I want something comforting to listen to going to sleep, but that's new enough to hold my interest.
Yes,
and that's something that I loved doing as a kid. I would listen to audiobooks going to sleep. So yeah, I think this is the kind of thing that I'd like to listen again and would be nice for that sort of comforting thing there. And like you say, would recommend to other people. I think we possibly had the How to Train Your Dragon audiobooks when I was younger.
Yeah.
But I actually had like quite a lull in audiobooks at that sort of age of story like bracket. I had a lot of much younger titles in audio and then, moved on to adult ones afterwards, and I didn't have a load there, and I'm not sure exactly why that was, but I like that there's more coming up, as audio is increasing, as there's more and more audiobooks, there are more and more audiobooks in that age range. I read quite a lot of books in that age range. I didn't listen to as many books in that age range, so it's really nice that they are definitely out there and growing as the whole audiobook industry grows as well, which is really good. It makes me excited that there's going to be, generations of kids that are going to listen to so much more, and in that age point going to listen to so much more and discovering new ones and, maybe not even more passion than us because we're pretty passionate, but, loving it like we do. And, and it's really quite exciting thinking of like people that are going to join the audiobook industry having listen to books like these throughout their childhood and the kind of exciting things that they're going to do, their own opinions like we've had on what the music was like, what the sound effects were like, what the narration was like, what the writing was like, and that they're going to bring all that to making even better ones in the future, which I think is really good. And I also wanted to say like this is a good one because they are really quite long and there's 4 of them.
Yes.
So it's really nice because it's something that kids can get really invested in, and whether it's because you've got a long car journey with kids maybe, and you can put one on, you're not going to have to, stop after an hour and be like, oh man, what do we do now?
Yeah.
They're going to keep you going for a while. And also, if you've got really voracious listeners that, kids that love fiction, love stories and want more, there's a good amount of audio here to keep them going. And we can certainly say that it finishes off well, and we're going to assume that the first 3 books are pretty good too. So yeah, a strong recommendation from me too, I think. even with some slight criticisms.
So it's a strong recommendation for me too. It's the only children's title on the list, so that's going to be interesting how the judges will view it because of that. But yeah, I just want to say kind of one last thing. We talked a little bit about the ending. We don't want to give any too many spoilers away, but it's just kind of like you think it's telling one story, but at the end you realize,
it's a good
really
twist.
Meta, and it's telling like
it does. So, it goes so meta, and I really loved this discussion in there about why stories are important, which I thought was really good and quite intellectual, but in a way that not inaccessible for kids, like we've just been talking about, accessible, but also in a way where as a kid, I think you being told why stories are so important, and you can identify with that having just listened to a great story. And like as an adult, and certainly for me as an adult that works in publishing and loves stories so much, could really connect with it in another way as well.
Okay, so that's 2 firm recommendations from us. The next 2 audiobooks we're going to be reviewing are The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien, as narrated by Andy Serkis, and Sandman Act 2 as narrated by full cast. So look out for that one, guys. As ever, thanks for listening. This is a really exciting thing for us to be kind of one of the official partners for the British Book Awards. And you can email us at audiobookishpod@gmail.com, and you can follow us on social media at audiobookishpod. Thank you, guys, and goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.